Life has a way of tricking you into thinking everything's just right, only to throw you a punch to the gut when you least expect it. I'm Ethan, 36 years old, a software engineer with a decent career. Or at least, I thought it was decent. I had the job, the house, and up until recently, what I would have called a picture-perfect marriage. It's funny how we all start out thinking we've got everything under control, isn't it? That's how I felt, too. I met Sophia about 6 years ago at a tech law conference where I was speaking. She's a lawyer. Sharp, quick-witted, and honestly, I couldn't keep up with her. She stood out immediately. That presence, the way she could captivate a room just by talking, was magnetic. At first, it was kind of intimidating, but in the best way possible. She seemed like everything I'd always wanted. Smart, driven, beautiful. Once we started dating, it felt like we were this unstoppable couple. She was killing it in her career. I was doing well in mine. We just worked together, I thought I was lucky, or so I told myself. Fast forward 5 years into marriage, and everything seemed stable. I can't even stand that word now. People would have said we were living the dream. Good jobs, solid money, a baby on the way. Sophia was 8 months pregnant, and we were doing all those cliché things that expectant parents do. I remember putting together the nursery, laughing over baby names, joking about how we'd handle sleepless nights. When the baby came, I was over the moon. All the usual family man stuff. But here's the thing. Sometimes the red flags come at you quietly. You don't even see them until they've already grown too big to ignore. I started noticing Sophia pulling away. She spent more time on her phone, and whenever I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd just smile and wave me off. Pregnancy stuff, she'd say. Just stress and nerves. It all made sense to her, but I could feel the distance growing. She started going out more, meeting up with old friends. At least that's what she told me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that everything was fine, that the stress of the pregnancy was the only thing weighing on her. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I remember trying to bring it up one night, just casually, We were sitting on the couch, and she was, of course, on her phone again. "Hey, you've been going out a lot lately," I said, trying to sound calm. Not accusing, just asking. "Everything all right?" She looked up at me with that same smile. I used to love that smile. Now, it just makes my stomach turn when I think about it. "It's just the pregnancy," she said. "I get anxious, and seeing friends helps." She said it so easily, like it was no big deal. Like that should fix everything. I let it slide, convinced myself I was just being paranoid, but it kept bothering me. That's when everything started to unravel, even if I didn't realize it at the time. It's crazy how you can ignore the signs. You trick yourself into thinking everything's fine because facing the truth is just too hard. We kept up with our usual routine, pretending nothing was wrong. I told myself I was just overthinking it. After all, we were about to have a kid. What kind of person does something shady when their wife is 8 months pregnant, right? But when I think back now, it was all there. The signs I ignored. The late nights out, the constant need to be on her phone, the endless excuses. I guess I didn't want to believe it. I was too wrapped up in this future I thought we'd have, me, her, and the baby. But when you're that invested in someone, you don't notice the cracks forming until they're too big to hide. And trust me, those cracks were there. They were ready to break everything apart. You ever hear how life can change in an instant? That's exactly what happened to me. It was a regular Saturday evening. Nothing special, just another weekend like any other. Sophia told me she was meeting an old friend, someone she hadn't seen in ages. I didn't think twice about it. Why would I? We had our routines, our lives, and I had no reason to question her. So, like the trusting idiot I was, I wished her a good time and stayed home. She even kissed me goodbye, like everything was normal. Looking back, I hate myself for missing the little things. With the house to myself, I decided to get some work done. I can get lost in a project when it's quiet, so I figured it would be a productive evening. A couple of hours passed, and I realized we were running low on groceries. Sophia wasn't going to be home for a while, so I decided to go to the store. Simple enough, right? I was just thinking about what we needed for the week ahead. And then, out of nowhere, I saw her car. It was parked in front of a small cafe tucked away on a side street. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I knew Sophia was out, so it made sense her car would be there. She was meeting a friend, after all. But as I got closer, something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but this strange feeling started bubbling up inside me. You know that feeling, the one that tells you something's wrong even when you don't have all the details? I tried to ignore it, told myself I was just being paranoid. But when I got closer, I saw her sitting in the car. And she wasn't alone. There was a man in the passenger seat, a man I didn't recognize. At first, I thought maybe it was the friend she had mentioned. Sophia knew a lot of people, and I wasn't the type to question every little thing. But the way they were sitting, the way they were leaning in close to each other, it didn't feel right. And then it happened. A moment I'll never forget. I watched as Sophia leaned over and kissed him right there in the car, in public. Like no one else in the world existed. I don't even know how to describe what hit me in that moment. It was like everything inside me broke. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The woman I'd spent 6 years with, the mother of my unborn child, was there with some random guy, doing that without a care in the world. I couldn't move. I was frozen, just staring at the scene like it was happening in slow motion. My mind couldn't process what was happening, but when it finally did, rage exploded inside me. Without even thinking, I slammed the car into park and stormed out of the vehicle, heading straight for them. I didn't even know what I was doing. There was no plan. I just wanted it to stop. I wanted to erase what I'd seen, make it all go away, and make the pain disappear. I grabbed the car door and yanked it open. Without thinking, I was on him, fists flying, hammering him over and over. I didn't care who he was. I didn't care about the consequences. All I cared about was hurting him. Maybe, deep down, part of me wanted to hurt her, too, but I couldn't bring myself to look at her. The shock on her face was burned into my mind, and honestly, I didn't even hear the screams until later. I was so consumed by the urge to stop the nightmare I was living in that I couldn't focus on anything else. I think she yelled at me to stop. Maybe she didn't. Honestly, I can't remember. Everything is a blur except for the overwhelming feelings of rage and betrayal drowning me. I didn't stop until I felt someone yanking me off him. It all happened so fast, but in that moment, it felt like an eternity. That's when I heard it, the sirens. God, I still remember how sharp they sounded, cutting through the chaos, through the mess I'd created. I didn't even realize how bad it had gotten until I felt hands on me, pulling me away from him. I turned around and there they were. 2 cops. They must have seen the whole thing because I didn't get a chance to say a word. Not that I could explain anyway. I was still in shock, trying to process what I had just witnessed. The guy? Sophia's whatever he was? He looked like hell. My fists had done their job, and he was bleeding from his nose and mouth, holding his hands up like he was the victim. Maybe in the eyes of the law, he was. But in mine, he deserved every damn punch. "Sir, back off." One of the cops yelled at me, his hand already resting on his gun like I was some kind of threat. To them, I guess I was. They didn't waste any time. I was cuffed and tossed into the back of a squad car before I even had time to think. As they shoved me into the seat, I caught one last glimpse of Sophia. She was still sitting in the car, frozen, like she couldn't even process what had just happened. I wanted to scream at her, to ask her why, but the words wouldn't come. Not then. All I felt was numb. It was like my mind had shut down, refusing to face the reality of it all. The ride to the station was a blur. The whole time, I kept replaying the scene in my head, over and over. My wife, my pregnant wife, doing that with some stranger, and me beating the hell out of him like some kind of madman. How did it all get to this? Where had I gone wrong? Sitting in that holding cell, it hit me all at once. My life was ruined. Everything I thought I knew, everything I believed in, was a lie. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had betrayed me in the most vile way. I felt sick. The anger was still there, bubbling just beneath the surface. But now, it was mixed with something else, something far worse. A deep, gnawing sadness. Loss. That's what it felt like. Like I'd lost everything in one night. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the walls, trying to process it all. Time didn't matter. Nothing did. Eventually, the door opened. There she was, Sophia. Tears were streaming down her face, her makeup a mess from all the crying. But I wasn't moved. Not by the tears, not by the fake regret she was trying to show me. She was a good actress when she wanted to be. But this time, I saw right through her. Or maybe I just didn't care anymore. "Ethan, please," she sobbed, stepping toward me like she was about to hug me. I flinched, pulling away from her. The very sight of her made my stomach twist. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking." I wanted to laugh, but instead, I just stared at her, fists clenched at my sides, trying to control the storm inside me. "You don't know what you were thinking?" I finally managed to say. The words came out like acid. "After everything I saw, after what you did, that's what you're going with." Her voice trembled. "It was a mistake, I swear. I don't know what came over me. It was the stress, the pregnancy. I wasn't in my right mind." She sounded like she was the one who had been wronged, like I was the one who should be apologizing. "Please, Ethan, you have to believe me." "Believe you?" I repeated, my voice full of disbelief. "After everything I just saw, you expect me to believe it was just stress, that you weren't in your right mind? Bullshit." I watched her flinch, her tears falling harder now, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I was done being played for a fool. "I love you," she whispered, stepping closer again. "I made a mistake, but it doesn't change the fact that I love you. Please, Ethan, we can fix this. We can work through it. Don't throw everything away." I couldn't believe it. How could she stand there, after everything, after what I saw, and talk about love, about fixing things? Did she think I was that weak, that stupid? Did she really think I could just forget everything I'd seen and go back to how things were? "Fix this," I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. "How do you fix that, Sophia? How do you fix seeing your wife with another man, doing that?" She didn't have an answer. All she could do was cry, beg, and make excuses. Every word she said just made my blood boil even more. She tried to tell me it was a one-time thing, that she didn't even know why she did it. But I wasn't buying it anymore. Not a chance. "Ethan, please," she cried, her voice desperate. "We have a baby on the way. You can't leave us. You can't leave me. We need you." And there it was, the manipulation. She used the baby like a shield, like somehow the fact that she was pregnant meant I had to forgive her. Like I owed her another chance because of the child she was carrying. But I couldn't even look at the baby the same way anymore. I couldn't even be sure it was mine. After everything, how could I be? "I'm getting a DNA test," I said, flatly. The words were cold, final. "And if that baby isn't mine, we're done. Do you hear me, Sophia? We're done." Her face went pale. She hadn't expected that. Hell, I hadn't expected it either. But it was the truth. I had to know. And if that baby wasn't mine, there was no coming back from that. "Ethan, no," she cried, reaching for me. But I stepped back, out of her reach. I couldn't stand being near her. Not after all of this. "It was a mistake. You don't understand," she begged. "Stop." I cut her off, my voice icy. "I understand more than you think, Sophia, and I'm done." I turned away from her, ignoring the sobs that followed, ignoring the way she collapsed into a chair, still pleading for forgiveness. It hit me then. No amount of excuses from Sophia would matter anymore. No matter how many times she cried, begged, or apologized. The trust was gone, and without it, there was nothing left. I was done. Leaving the police station that night, the image of her, broken, crying, begging me to stay, stuck with me. But it didn't matter anymore. Her tears, her apologies, her excuses, none of it meant anything. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me into staying. Not after everything, not with the lies, and certainly not with the pregnancy. The drive back home felt like I was moving through some sort of fog, surreal and heavy. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight I thought it might snap, my knuckles burning with the pressure. The anger was there, simmering just under the surface, but there was something else, something worse. This deep, hollow pain gnawing at my insides. It felt like a part of me had been ripped away, like the foundation of everything I thought I knew had crumbled beneath me. I had trusted her with everything, and in return, she shattered me. When I pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a few minutes, just staring at the house. Our house. The one we had picked out together, where we had planned to raise our child. Now it felt like a place I didn't even recognize. A shell of the life I thought I had. I couldn't bring myself to go inside right away. I kept staring at that house, wondering if walking through the door would make all of this real, if it would make the nightmare permanent. I knew, deep down, that going inside meant accepting that the life I had been living was gone. So I stayed in the car a little longer, trying to figure out what to do. Eventually, I dragged myself out of the car and walked to the front door. When I stepped inside, the silence hit me like a physical blow. It was deafening. There was no laughter, no warmth, no sound of Sophia's voice. Just emptiness. I stood there, frozen for a moment, taking in the life we had built. Now nothing more than a cold, hollow shell. For the first time, I felt utterly alone. That anger started to build again, bubbling up, and before I knew it, I threw my keys across the room. The sound of them clanging against the wall was loud, but it felt empty, like the noise itself had no meaning. I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch something, anything to release the fury inside me, but I didn't. Instead, I stood there, breathing heavily, trying to keep control over the storm inside me. I knew I couldn't stay there. Not that night. Not in that house. I grabbed a bag, shoved some clothes into it without thinking about it, and walked out. I just needed to leave, to clear my head, to get away from everything. I wasn't going to let her pull me back with guilt. Not after what she had done. On the way to Dylan's, I couldn't stop replaying her words in my head. Her begging me, her excuses, her pathetic attempts to justify herself. The nerve she had to blame the pregnancy. Like the stress of carrying our child made what she did okay. Like it somehow gave her a pass to betray me. I was disgusted. Dylan was the only person I could think of to call. He was my best friend, the one person who might be able to help me make sense of all this mess. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I didn't need a shoulder to cry on or someone to tell me everything would be okay. What I needed was someone who would tell me the hard truth, no matter how brutal it was. When I got to his place, it was late, but he didn't hesitate to let me in. He didn't need any words. One look at my face and he knew something had gone terribly wrong. "Man, what happened?" he asked, concern in his voice as he led me to the living room. I sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. I hadn't even fully processed it all, but it all spilled out in a rush. I told him everything, about catching Sophia with that guy, the fight, the arrest, her pitiful excuses. By the time I finished, I was out of breath. I'd been holding all of this in for so long, and now that it was all out, it felt like a flood. Dylan sat quietly for a moment, letting it all sink in. Then, he shook his head and muttered, "Jesus, Ethan, I don't even know what to say." "That's messed up," I said, rubbing my face. I don't know what to do. She's trying to use the baby, trying to make me feel guilty. But I can't. I can't do this." "You can't stay," he said, leaning back in his chair, his voice steady. "You can't trust her anymore. And without trust, there's nothing left." "There's nothing left," I repeated, my voice rough, as the weight of those words sank in. We sat there in silence for a while, the heaviness of everything pressing down on us. Dylan wasn't one to sugarcoat things, and that's exactly what I needed right now. I needed someone to give it to me straight. "You need to get a DNA test," Dylan finally said, breaking the silence. "You need to know if that baby's even yours." The words hit me like a punch. I'd thought about it already, but hearing it out loud made it real. The possibility that the baby I'd been preparing to welcome into my life might not even be mine was almost too much to handle. "I know," I said quietly, my voice breaking. "I told her I'm not staying until I know for sure." "And if the baby isn't yours?" he asked, his voice cautious, as if he already knew the answer. "Then I'm done," I said, my voice firm, even though everything in me felt broken. "I'm divorcing her." Dylan nodded without saying anything. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what I meant. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "Ethan, I know this is hell for you, but whatever happens, you're going to get through this. And if that baby is yours, well, we'll figure it out." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to think that somehow I would make it through this, that life would go back to some kind of normal. But right then, all I could feel was the crushing weight of betrayal, the uncertainty, and the anger that still burned through me. My whole world had been turned upside down, and I had no idea what came next. The next few days were a blur. I stayed at Dylan's place, barely eating, barely sleeping, just waiting for the DNA test results. Sophia kept calling, leaving voicemail after voicemail, but I ignored them all. I couldn't deal with her. Not until I knew the truth. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted in knots. I was waiting for that call, the one that would determine if everything I feared was true or if there was still hope left. And then it came. The call. The one I would never forget. The day everything I had feared was confirmed. You think you're ready for that moment. You tell yourself that after everything, the sleepless nights, the constant replaying of those memories, and the silence between you and your wife, you'll be able to handle it. But when the truth hits, it breaks you in ways you can't imagine. The call came early that morning. I was still at Dylan's, barely holding it together. We'd been waiting for weeks. The DNA test was supposed to come back any day, but every hour that passed felt like a lifetime. I told myself I was ready for whatever the results were, but deep down, I knew I wasn't. I stared at my phone when it rang. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it. This was the moment that everything would change again. Dylan was still asleep, and I didn't want to wake him up. I took the call in the stillness, standing in the small kitchen, my breath shallow. The lab tech's voice came through the line, detached and clinical. "Mr. Ethan," they said, like they were delivering a grocery list. Their tone as if this was just another day on the job. To them, it was. But for me, this was my entire world. "Yeah," I managed to croak, my voice rough, like I hadn't spoken in days. "The DNA test results are in. Unfortunately, the results show that you were not the biological father of the child." That was it. A simple, sterile sentence. No emotion, no sympathy, just cold facts. They couldn't have known that those words were a wrecking ball, smashing through what little was left of my life. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The phone slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. I just stood there, staring at nothing. The words echoed in my mind, over and over. Not the father, not the father, not the father. It felt like the ground had been yanked out from under me, like everything I had been building toward, the excitement, the plans, the future, just evaporated, gone. I wasn't angry in that moment. It wasn't anger. It was something far worse. It was a hollow, soul-crushing sadness that washed over me. I felt empty, like someone had hollowed me out and left me with nothing but an aching shell. How long I stood there, I don't know. Minutes, hours, time didn't seem to matter anymore. But eventually, Dylan came out, groggy and still half asleep, and his eyes found me immediately. He must have known what had happened, just by looking at me. "Ethan," he said quietly, stepping closer. I shook my head, unable to say a word. Dylan didn't press me for more. He just stood there, waiting for me to speak when I could. After what felt like forever, I finally found my voice. "I'm not the father." The truth that I had been dreading, the reality that Sophia had taken from me. Not just my trust, but my future. The baby I had been preparing for wasn't mine. She had betrayed me, and now I had nothing. Dylan cursed under his breath and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. He didn't need to say anything else. What was there to say? What do you say to someone whose life has just fallen apart in the blink of an eye? After the shock wore off, the anger came rushing back, hot and sharp, like a knife to the gut. I grabbed my phone and started listening to the voicemail Sophia had left over the past few days. I hadn't bothered listening to them before, but now I needed to hear what she had to say, if only to fuel the fire that was burning inside me. Her voice filled the air when I pressed play. "Ethan, please call me. I know you're angry, but we need to talk. Please, for the baby's sake." I felt sick. For the baby's sake. She had the nerve to keep saying that, as if I was still part of this family, like I hadn't just been destroyed. I deleted the message, and then the next one played. "I'm sorry." "Okay, I'm so sorry. You can't just leave us like this. I made a mistake, but we can get through this. We have to. For our family." Each voicemail was the same. Empty apologies, desperate pleas. She didn't even know the results yet. She didn't know that I was no longer tied to her or that baby. She didn't know that it was all over. When she found out, I couldn't even imagine her reaction. But by then, I didn't care. I was done. Later that day, she called. Her voice was panicked. Ethan, did you get the results? Ethan, please talk to me. I stayed quiet for a moment, letting her sit in that anxiety, letting her squirm. She deserved to feel every ounce of the pain she had caused. Yeah, I said flatly. My voice was empty. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, her voice catching as she asked, Is it yours? I almost laughed, but all I felt was disgust. How could she ask that after everything? No, Sophia, I said, my voice cold, final. It's not mine. Her gasp on the other end was everything I needed to hear. She hadn't expected that. She had convinced herself that I would still be tied to her, that I would stay even after everything. Ethan, we're done, I interrupted, my voice firm, unwavering. I'm filing for divorce. There's nothing left to talk about. Please, she cried, her voice cracking. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for this to happen. We can still fix this. Fix what? I said, my words cutting through the air. Sophia, you slept with another man, got pregnant, and now you're playing the victim? There's nothing to fix. It's over. She kept crying, kept begging, but I was already done. I ended the call, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long, peace. Not the kind of peace you get from making the right choice. No, it was something colder, final, a sense of relief that came after making a decision you can't take back. I wasn't Ethan the husband anymore. I wasn't the expectant father preparing to welcome a child. That life was gone, buried under the wreckage Sophia had left behind. All that was left now was clarity. It was over, and there was no going back. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I didn't waste time telling Sophia what I was doing. There was nothing to discuss. She made her choices. Now, it was my turn. The paperwork was simple enough. My lawyer, who'd seen this kind of thing hundreds of times, assured me it would be a smooth process, as long as we both agreed to terms. What he didn't anticipate was Sophia's desperation. You'd think that after everything, being caught, bringing another man's child into the world, she'd want to end things quietly, with as little drama as possible. But no. Sophia wasn't about to let me walk away without a fight. Within days of filing, the calls started coming. First, it was the voicemails, one after another, frantic and pleading. She kept repeating the same things. We can fix this. Please, for the baby. I wasn't her baby's father, and she had no clue what to do next. Every time I heard those words, I reminded myself of where I stood. I didn't even bother calling her back. What was the point? I had already mentally checked out. When I didn't respond, she only ramped up the drama. One evening, I returned to Dylan's place, still my safe haven through all this, and found her sitting on the front steps, her face a mess of tears. She must have driven over in one last, desperate attempt to win me back, but I wasn't in the mood. I was exhausted. Exhausted with her, exhausted with the endless drama, and exhausted pretending we had something left to save. What are you doing here, Sophia? I asked, my voice cold, drained of all patience for her theatrics. We need to talk, Ethan, she pleaded, standing up and trying to wipe the tears from her face, as though doing that would make me forget everything she'd done. Please, we can't end it like this. I made a mistake, but we can fix it. We can still be a family. A family. I almost laughed at the thought. We haven't been a family in a long time, Sophia. You killed that the moment you decided to betray me. She flinched as if I'd slapped her, but I didn't care. She needed to hear the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she cried, stepping toward me. It was just a mistake. A stupid mistake. Please don't throw everything away over one bad choice. One bad choice. I couldn't hold back anymore. My anger flared up. That wasn't just one bad choice, Sophia. You betrayed me, and then you tried to lie your way out of it. You kept going even after I caught you. And now you're trying to use the baby, as if it's some kind of bargaining chip to make me stay? I shot back. Her face went pale, and for a moment, she seemed speechless. I could see the panic in her eyes, the dawning realization that there was no coming back from this. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking, but I had no interest in hearing apologies anymore. "I don't care, Sophia. It's over. We're done. I'd already filed for divorce. The papers are in the mail, and you'll sign them. There's nothing left to say." The silence between us felt thick, suffocating. I could see the defeat on her face, the way her shoulders slumped, as if all the fight had drained out of her. She wasn't used to this. Not losing. Not like this. Sophia had always been the one in control, always the one with the upper hand, but not anymore. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, scream, or throw one last tantrum to try to guilt me into staying. But she didn't. She just stood there, tears flowing, lips trembling. I didn't feel sorry for her. I didn't feel anything at all. I was numb. "Fine," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll sign the papers." And just like that, it was over. She turned and walked to her car, not looking back, not saying another word. I watched her leave, but there was no sense of triumph, no satisfaction, just an empty, aching void. Even though I was the one ending it, it was hard to believe we had really reached this point. The following weeks were a blur. Papers, meetings with lawyers, the whole divorce process moving faster than I expected, which, in a way, was a relief. Sophia, true to her word, signed the papers with barely any resistance. Maybe she finally understood that no amount of tears or guilt trips was going to change my mind. I heard she moved in with the guy she cheated on me with. That should have made me feel something. Anger, jealousy, anything. But it didn't. I felt nothing. I never went back to the house after the papers were signed. I couldn't. It wasn't home anymore. Just a building full of memories that felt like someone else's life. I left it all to her. Let her live in the hollow shell of what we once had. I was done with it. As for me, I stayed with Dylan for a while longer, just trying to figure out what my life was supposed to look like now. No grand moments of closure. No dramatic realizations. Just a quiet acceptance that I was still standing, even after everything. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the anger would sneak back in, and I'd lie awake, replaying it all in my mind, wondering if there had been some point, some choice I could have made differently. But I always came to the same conclusion. Sophia made her choices. Now, I was making mine. Cutting ties wasn't just about the divorce papers. It was about letting go of everything we had been, or at least everything I thought we were. The hardest part wasn't losing her. It was losing the future I'd imagined. The family, the life we were building. That was the real loss. And that took the longest to accept. But I did. Slowly, painfully, I came to terms with it. I cut her off completely. No more calls, no more texts. I didn't need updates from her. No more apologies or attempts at fixing things. I didn't need anything from her. The last thing left was the house. I sold it the moment the papers were finalized, getting rid of the place and everything in it. I didn't want any reminders of the life I was leaving behind. It was time for a fresh start, even if I didn't know what that looked like yet. By the time the sale went through, it felt like I had finally closed the door on that chapter. I was free. I wish I could say that after the divorce, everything fell into place. That life got better, like flipping a switch. But that's not how it works. Healing doesn't happen overnight. The truth is, even after the papers were signed, even after I cut all ties with Sophia, I still felt the weight of it all. There's no easy way to get over betrayal, humiliation, or anger. It sticks with you, no matter how much you try to push it down. For the first few months, I was in survival mode, just going through the motions, working, keeping busy, trying not to think too much. But even then, there were times when everything would catch up with me. I'd replay scenes in my head, her with him, the lies, the look on her face when I told her it was over. I hated that she still had that power over me, that, even after all of this, she could still take up space in my head. But time has a way of dulling the sharp edges of pain. Slowly, bit by bit, I started feeling like myself again. I reconnected with old friends, threw myself into work, and started thinking about what came next for me. I wasn't ready for anything serious, but I was ready to start living again. on my own terms. Then one day, completely out of nowhere, I got some news about Sophia. It came through a mutual friend, one of those people who somehow manages to stay connected to everyone, even after everything falls apart. I hadn't asked for an update, but there it was. I got the text out of nowhere. "Hey man, did you hear about Sophia?" I stared at the screen, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. Part of me didn't want to know anything more. I'd done everything I could to move on, to erase her from my life. But curiosity got the better of me, and before I knew it, I found myself typing back, "No, what about her?" The reply came almost instantly. "She's with that guy now, the one you caught her with. But get this, he's in jail. Domestic violence. Apparently, he's been beating the hell out of her for a while now." I couldn't believe what I was reading. I blinked, reread the message, and a mix of emotions hit me all at once. Anger, disgust, a twisted sense of irony. But what hit hardest was relief. You'd think I'd feel some sense of satisfaction hearing that. After everything she put me through, you'd expect that old saying, "What goes around comes around," to feel like justice. And yeah, a part of me thought, she deserves it. After the betrayal, the manipulation with the baby, and all the lies, it felt like karma finally catching up with her. She had ended up with someone even worse than me. In a way, it felt like poetic justice. But, honestly, I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sorry for her. Don't get me wrong, what she did to me was unforgivable. She wrecked our marriage, destroyed my trust, and shattered the future we were supposed to have. But nobody deserves to be in a relationship like that. Nobody deserves to live in fear, to be hurt by someone who's supposed to love them. I sat there for a while, processing the news. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't care about Sophia anymore. Not really. Her life, her choices, those weren't my problem anymore. She had made her bed, and now it was time for her to lie in it. But that didn't mean I had to feel anything about it. No anger, no pity, no desire for revenge, nothing. I was free from all of it. And that's when I knew I had truly moved on. When I could hear about Sophia's life and feel absolutely nothing. I won't sugarcoat it. The road to recovery wasn't easy. Even after the divorce, even after hearing about the mess she'd gotten herself into, it took time to rebuild. You don't just bounce back from that kind of betrayal. It leaves scars, deep ones. But over time, those scars started to heal. Slowly, but surely. I began to put my life back together, piece by piece. I moved into a new place, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I focused on work, on reconnecting with friends, and for the first time in a long time, on myself. I wasn't thinking about anyone else's needs, anyone else's expectations. It was just me, figuring out what I wanted from life. People asked me if I was ready to start dating again. At first, I wasn't. The thought of trusting someone, of being vulnerable again, terrified me. But eventually, something shifted. It wasn't some big epiphany or dramatic moment. It was gradual. I started meeting new people, going out again, dipping my toes back into the world of relationships. And yeah, I met someone. Not in a love-at-first-sight kind of way. It was slow, casual, just a woman I met through friends. Her name's Maya, and she's different from Sophia, in all the best ways. Honest, kind, no games, no drama. It's been refreshing, to say the least. We're taking things slow. I'm not rushing into anything. I've learned that lesson. But for the first time in a long while, I'm actually excited about the future. I can picture myself being happy again, building something real, something new. And that's something I never thought I'd feel again after everything with Sophia. Looking back now, I see that her betrayal, as much as it devastated me, actually gave me a new perspective. It forced me to reevaluate my life, to see things for what they truly were. Yeah, it was hell. But in a strange way, it was also the thing that set me free. I'm stronger now, more sure of who I am and what I want. The scars are still there, but they don't hurt as much anymore. They're just reminders of what I've been through, of what I've survived. I don't know what the future holds for me or for Maya, or even for my life in general. But I do know one thing. I'm not afraid of it anymore. I'm ready to move forward, ready to keep growing, ready to live a life that's truly mine. And that's what recovery looks like. It's not about forgetting the past or pretending the pain never happened. It's about taking those experiences, learning from them, and becoming someone stronger on the other side.